Hello and welcome to a review of The Terminal Experiment by Robert Sawyer, originally published in 1995. It is a Nebula Award winner, which is why I decided to enjoy this via Audible, mostly because I was having a really hard time, and am having a really hard time, finding out in the wild. And I can see why, as that I thoroughly enjoyed this book. It may have a little bit of a bias, and I will preface that in this video, due to the fact that I am currently dealing personally with a lot of death and dying in my life. So I was already kind of mentally in that headspace to be perfectly happy to consume a transhumanist book dealing with, you know, what is human morality, what is humanity, what is and what can be a life beyond death. And this book opens up very snappy with a very much a grabby beginning, you know, kind of reminiscent of a lot of the mystery thriller books that you see, giving me very much Robert London vibes, or Brad Thor, or Robert B. Parker, which actually is mentioned in the book. Very much like first chapter, super hard-hitting, opening up, like trying to make sure it engages you in with like a murder mystery, despite the fact that at the end of the first chapter it pretty much tells you who the murderer is, and then spends the first half of the book explaining itself, giving you background information on the characters as well as the concepts that are involved and how those concepts came into play in the story. Deals really heavy with AI, which feels very contemporary now in 2023. It does mention the very popular science fiction topic of the time of nanobots, which I don't know why that was singularly a 90s topic, but it was super popular in the beginning in the mid 90s, and then it just kind of died as a science fiction topic, or it seems to have, in my personal opinions, after the 90s. There seems to be less and less information and or storylines revolving nanotech and a lot more revolving artificial intelligence. And because of the elements of artificial intelligence in this book, as I mentioned, it does feel very contemporary, especially with, you know, ChatGPT, what's the other one? You know, OpenAI, what's the really, Midgard, all of those technologies now, and with people now creating content with AI art, and also with people creating content of both current and past celebrities. You know, it started with, you know, pornographic deepfakes, now moving into like just them making whole songs in the style of that person with an AI generated art form of that person. And I think one of my favorite thing is, you know, a YouTuber, Philip DeFranco, says like AI is never going to be as bad as it is today. It is only going to continue to grow. And this definitely deals with that subject matter quite well. I will like to say that despite it feeling very contemporary, there are a couple of things that did ground me in the fact that this is not a contemporary book. It is something from the 90s, in so much that AI and nanobots, the nanobots in particularly, kept bringing me back when they were mentioning them, because that was a rising technology that is prevalent in the book. And also the lack of cell phones was interesting. You know, they're calling from their office, or they're calling through their car phone, which, you know, you can do now, so that was nice. But there wasn't a cell phone in sight, which was odd. Everything was using a home personal phone, and now with the rise of cell phones, like almost nobody has a home personal phone anymore. So that was about the only current technology that was missing, that I think that would have made it feel even more prevalent today. I think the majority of my enjoyment from the book came from a couple of factors. One, as I mentioned, I am personally dealing with a lot of concepts of death currently in my life, which is unfortunate, and also why I haven't been uploading as much. Also, and this topic deals heavily with it because, you know, what is a soul? Is there life after death? What beings do and do not have souls? Like, when is the concept of a soul occurring? What is the afterlife? Another major part of my enjoyment of this book was how well Sawyer was able to anticipate people's questions. If technology could determine that souls, one, exist, and two, there's a way to track them, what would that do to the world? Like, what would that do to the current human society, due to the fact that humans will human? And I think Sawyer did an excellent job showing that, even if there is scientific evidence that something that most current humanity would consider a soul would exist, that people's own inherent beliefs and biases are so ingrained in themselves, it would be really hard to change their worldview or their after worldview, and instead try to make the new scientific data fit within their own current mindset, where it wouldn't actually necessarily change the world in a unifying way, but we as human beings will still find a way to divide ourselves, which I thought was very masterfully done. Whenever he would go into that in the story, it was always just kind of like an interesting forward to the chapter. And I thought that it was very brilliantly done, because it just showed that Sawyer definitely grasped the human experience, but more from just a singular way. It was very much a world view. The actual story itself takes place in Canada. You know, I'm an American, and so there is a lot of references to America, and I think because of the fact it took place in Canada, that there is a little bit more of an emphasis on a worldview, which is actually really nice. There was a lot of discussion about, you know, Canada and places and how their government works and their monetary system, but because of the fact that it wasn't an American focused book, I do feel like more depth and thought was towards the global experience as to what was happening when the discovery occurred that supposedly changed humanity forever, versus I feel like if it was a purely an American perspective, it maybe would not have gone that much in depth to how the rest of the world reacted, because Americans tend to be very nationalistic in that way. I mean, Robert Sawyer himself is a Canadian author, so he's just writing what he knows, and I feel like this would be a really great book to give to someone who typically only reads modern fiction, like modern mystery or modern thrillers or modern crime books, in order to like break them into the science fiction genre. I feel like Robert Sawyer in general is a very snappy writer. He writes in that way where, like I said, he normally gives you a good hook first chapter, then does a really nice narrative for the first half, hits the crux of the problem, and then goes into the resolution. I feel like he does a very good formulaic approach to writing that is easily digestible and also more prevalent in the crime, thriller, mystery area. As someone who doesn't necessarily enjoy those type of books, because normally I can figure out who the whodunit is by the end, the fact that that kind of wasn't an issue in this book, because it was kind of talked about at the beginning, really helped my enjoyment. And actually, I honestly, for the first half of the book, completely forgot that, you know, there was a mystery and a crime to be solved in the beginning. Like, it was so well written, and the story and the characters were so dynamic, and the concepts were so interesting that I kind of forgot that there was a murder mystery in here somewhere and a whodunit. And then, of course, you know, the last half of the book resolves that fact. But I really liked it. I was surprised. I can now understand why I haven't been able to find it out in the wild. This does seem to be like a book that people would hold on to, and I feel like this is a science fiction novel that appeals to a much broader audience, and because of the fact that it's so well written and so interesting and so intrinsic to the human condition and the questions that humanity asks themselves almost every day, like what is the meaning of life? Do humans have a soul? Do other animals have a soul? What happens after we die? Because it deals with those concepts in the book, and it also still manages to feel contemporary almost 30 years later. I can see why it won the Nebula Award, and I can also see why people have decided, you know, even after 30 years from now, that they hold on to that book, and why it's so hard to find out in the wild. As I mentioned, I did listen to this via Audible, so if you have an Audible subscription, you can listen to it via recorded books for free. So there is that, or, you know, if it's in your TBR somewhere in the pile, I highly recommend you reading it, because it is probably one of the top 5 books I have consumed this year in the science fiction space. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, bye!